black waiter gave 2 orphaned children something to eat, and 18 years later, a helicopter appeared in front of her house. That morning, the sudden roar of a helicopter engine shattered the peaceful silence of the entire neighborhood. 45-year-old Tanya Jefferson stood in her familiar little kitchen, her hands deftly washing dishes, when she froze in surprise. She looked up and out the window, her eyes filled with curiosity and a flutter of anticipation as a large black helicopter slowly descended into her front yard. Neighbors poured out of their homes, stunned and whispering among themselves at the unprecedented sight in this quiet suburb. From the helicopter stepped 2 impeccably dressed figures, a refined man in an expensive suit, and beside him, a young woman carrying herself with confident grace, her eyes shining with emotion. They walked straight toward Tanya's front door. In that moment, Tanya recognized something incredibly familiar about these strangers. She slowly dried her hands, then made her way to the door, her heart racing faster with each step. A gentle smile touched her lips, as though she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. When the door swung open, the 3 of them stood in a hushed, poignant silence. The man spoke softly. "Miss Tanya, do you remember us?" Tanya stood still for a heartbeat, then her eyes lit up with overwhelming joy and surprise. Before her were no strangers at all but the 2 orphaned children, Eli and Nina, now grown and thriving. Her voice trembling, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes, Tanya gently embraced them both. How could I ever forget the 2 children who came into my life on that bitter winter night? She ushered them inside, quickly brewed steaming cups of tea, and the 3 of them settled around the small table in the living room. Tanya carefully set the hot mugs down, her gaze quivering as she looked at those familiar faces. It felt like just yesterday they had been gaunt, freezing children, eyes wide with fear and despair, shivering at the cold back door of the Golden Fork restaurant. 18 years had passed, yet those memories remained so vivid that her heart tightened every time she recalled them. 18 years ago, 27-year-old Tanya Jefferson was just a young woman struggling to survive in a harsh world. With her glossy black curls and deep brown eyes, she never dared to dream beyond her daily grind. Caring for her ailing mother with diabetes buried every youthful ambition beneath the weight of making ends meet. From before dawn until long after nightfall, Tanya toiled at the Golden Fork, an upscale restaurant whose patrons were all members of high society. The lavish banquets, the sparkling crystal stemware, and the warm glow of brass chandeliers stood in stark contrast to the reality Tanya faced. The restaurant's owner at the time was Robert Manning, a well-groomed white man in his 50s whose perpetually stern expression never left his face. Behind his cold blue eyes and practiced smile, Manning harbored a deep contempt for anyone outside his social circle, especially black employees like Tanya. He treated his staff as if they were objects, and no matter how hard she worked, Tanya never received so much as a nod of acknowledgement. One freezing December night, as Tanya was cleaning up the kitchen after the last diners had gone, she heard a faint rustling at the back door. At first, she thought it was just a gust of wind, but when she stepped outside, she froze at the sight of 2 children huddled together, shivering in tattered clothes, their eyes wide with fear. "What are you doing here?" Tanya asked softly, careful not to startle them. We're sorry," the older boy stammered, clutching his little sister's hand. "But we're so hungry." Tanya's heart broke. She glanced around, then hurried back to the kitchen to fetch a steaming bowl of soup and a few leftover rolls. When she handed the food to them, their faces lit up with gratitude so pure it brought tears to her eyes. From that night on, after every shift, Tanya prepared extra food to leave at the restaurant's back door. Gradually, the children learned to trust her and told her their names: Eli, 10 years old, and Nina, 8. Orphaned in a car accident, they had been living on the streets with nowhere else to turn. Tanya listened to their story with a heavy heart and silently vowed never to let them suffer hunger again. But her quiet kindness soon drew suspicion. One evening, after she'd just given food to Eli and Nina, Tanya turned to find Manning standing behind her, his face contorted with anger. "What do you think you're doing, Tanya?" he snarled, his icy glare sweeping over the frightened children. "Mr. Manning, I'm just helping these poor kids. They were hungry," she replied, her voice trembling. "This is a fine dining establishment, not a charity," Manning barked. Pointing a finger in her face, he sneered, "You're stealing from this restaurant under cover of darkness. Do you know what that means?" Tanya bowed her head, her hands shaking, but she refused to lie. "I understand, sir, but I couldn't leave them to starve." "In that case, let me simplify things for you," Manning said, his tone cold as ice. "You're fired, effective immediately. I won't have someone of your station tarnishing my restaurant's reputation." He slammed the door behind him, leaving Tanya frozen in the bitter night. The children burst into tears, terrified that they'd cost her her job. Tanya hugged them close, her own heart aching. Manning didn't stop there. Over the next few days, he spread rumors that Tanya had been fired for stealing food, ensuring no one would hire her. Doors that had once been open now slammed shut, leaving her humiliated and hopeless. Many nights she wept alone in her tiny room, haunted by Manning's cold disdain. Yet each time she looked at her sick mother and thought of Eli and Nina waiting for her, she swallowed her tears and steeled herself to carry on. Despite everything, Tanya never gave up on the children. She took any odd job she could find to earn enough for food each night. Her resolve grew stronger with every hardship. Little did she know that her silent compassion and steadfast determination were planting the seeds of a miracle, one that those who had scorned her could never have imagined. And now, as Tanya sits across from Eli and Nina in her humble living room, those memories feel as vivid as yesterday, reminding her of the difficult yet meaningful journey they are about to continue together. The painful memories haunted Tanya in her dreams and weighed on her every waking moment, none more so than the scornful look and contemptuous words Robert Manning had thrown at her on that fateful night. After Manning publicly fired her in front of the entire Golden Fork staff, his racist tirade echoed in Tanya's mind like an open wound. "People like you will never change your nature. I was a fool to think a black woman could work honestly and decently," he declared coldly, his eyes blazing with disdain. Tanya stood frozen in humiliation, her trembling hand clutching her crumpled apron. She had no words to defend herself. Her only thought was for the safety of the two poor children, Eli and Nina. But Tanya's suffering had only just begun. Manning wasn't content with merely costing her her job. Using his influence in the city's business community, he spread lies to ruin her reputation. He called every restaurant owner he knew, claiming Tanya had been stealing food from the Golden Fork, and even embellishing details to ensure her future was destroyed. Tanya didn't learn of Manning's campaign until she applied at a small neighborhood diner. The manager glanced at her resume and then looked up with unmistakable coldness. "I'm sorry, but we can't hire someone with that kind of background." Her heart sank. "What do you mean? I've never done anything wrong." He hesitated, then whispered, "Miss Jefferson, everyone in this industry knows you were fired for stealing food at the Golden Fork. I'm sorry, but we can't bring you on." Tanya left in tears, her heart aching with bitterness. But she refused to give in. Her ailing mother and the two innocent children waiting for her every night needed her. From that day on, Tanya took any work she could find, no matter how grueling. On frigid winter mornings, she donned her worn coat to hand out flyers for a corner grocery. In the afternoons, she spent hours scrubbing cars at a garage, her slender hands growing rough and cracked from cold water and harsh detergents. At night, she cleaned empty offices by the dim glow of fluorescent lights, the hum of the vacuum cleaner her only companion. Every penny she earned with her sweat and tears went to her mother, and a secret portion always went toward food for Eli and Nina. She never blamed the children. She knew only one person was to blame, Robert Manning. Meanwhile, Manning continued his lavish lifestyle, appearing at every high society gala in town, tailored suits, smug smiles, and calculated conversation earning him raves as a philanthropic pillar of the community. Tanya once spotted his face on the cover of a local paper beneath the headline, Businessman of the Year, Robert Manning, Champion of Charity. In that moment, the world felt unbearably unjust. Yet each time despair threatened to overwhelm her, Tanya thought of Eli and Nina, the two children she had found shivering on a winter night, trusting her to care for them. That thought steeled her resolve. One late evening, returning from her cleaning job, Tanya discovered the children asleep huddled on the sidewalk, their breaths steady in slumber. She gently placed a bag of food beside them, tears spilling down her cheeks as she looked at their innocent faces. Softly, she vowed into the night, "I will never give up on you. I will overcome every obstacle because I believe that justice and truth will prevail." Under the pale moonlight, their small figures seemed to bear witness to her promise, a promise as silent and powerful as a river's current beneath the surface, ready to sweep away every injustice and lie Robert Manning had heaped upon her. Tanya knew that though her trials were far from over, one day justice would be on her side. And when that day came, it would be Manning trembling before the truth he could no longer escape. The promises Tanya whispered to herself that night became the slender lifeline carrying her through the brutal days that followed. Faced with one obstacle after another in the wake of Robert Manning's campaign to ruin her reputation, she had to confront a harsh reality. There was no choice but to take society's lowest-paying, most demeaning jobs just to survive. Every dawn, before the sky even hinted at sunrise, Tanya pulled on her threadbare, faded coat and stepped out into the biting cold. Clutching a stack of flyers, she hurriedly offered them to passers-by. Their gazes, sometimes sneering, sometimes openly contemptuous, twisted her heart with pain. Once, she held out a flyer to a sharply dressed man who recoiled and sneered, "Get away from me. What would someone like you know about advertising or marketing?" Tanya bowed her head and walked away in silence, fighting back tears of shame. She never imagined she'd end up like this. But when she thought of her frail mother lying in that hospital bed waiting for her, she wiped her eyes dry and pressed on. In the afternoon, she reported for work at a small auto garage at the end of the block. Her hands quickly grew rough and calloused from constant contact with cold water and harsh cleaning chemicals. On frigid winter days, the water felt like knives against her skin, her hands reddening, aching deep in her bones. Yet Tanya never dared complain. She knew she couldn't afford to be weak if she wanted to care for her mother. As dusk fell, she raced from the garage to a late night office cleaning gig. The long, empty corridors and dark, silent offices reminded her of the invisible chasm between her and the rest of the world. One night, while she was vacuuming near the entrance, she overheard two young employees whispering, "This place is always filthy. I don't know what the cleaning crew even does. Every morning it's still a mess. I don't get why the company hires these useless people in the first place." Tanya kept working, their words stabbing her heart. No one knew that this black woman working in the shadows each night had once been an honors business administration graduate. She buried that secret deep in her heart, accepting that in her current world, degrees and talent meant nothing. Her brutal routine continued, but Tanya never stopped thinking about Eli and Nina. Those children had become her anchor, the reason she refused to break under life's weight. Then, one day, her worst nightmare came true. When she returned to the familiar street corner where she left food for Eli and Nina, they were gone. Her heart clenched. She ran up and down every nearby street, calling their names in desperation. At last, a neighbor approached her and whispered, "Those two orphans were picked up by social services. I heard they sent them to a children's home several miles away. I'm so sorry, Tanya." Her neighbor's words hit her like a thunderbolt. Tanya froze in the street, feeling all her strength drain away. Eli and Nina had been her last hope in this stormy life, and now they were taken from her too. That night, Tanya returned home, utterly spent and desperate. She found her mother asleep in her hospital bed, her breath shallow, her face lined with time. Tanya knelt beside her mother, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do anymore. I've lost my job, my dignity, and now Eli and Nina are gone. What am I supposed to do now?" Sensing her daughter's pain, her mother opened her eyes and grasped Tanya's weak hand. In a gentle whisper, she said, "Tanya, life is full of trials and injustices, but you must never give up. These sufferings are not your end. They're the fuel that will change your destiny. Promise me you'll never let anyone look down on you again." Tanya gazed into her mother's eyes, and in that moment a small flame of determination ignited in her chest, stronger than ever. She squeezed her mother's hand and spoke with tremulous resolve. "I promise, Mom. I will not surrender. I will find a way to reclaim what's mine and protect those I love." Silently, Tanya looked out the window at the pale moonlight bathing the little room, as if bearing witness to her fierce vow. From that moment on, she knew her life would be forever changed. She would never bow to injustice or prejudice again. It was time for Tanya to rise up, face her fate, and reshape her own destiny. The faint moonlight hadn't yet faded when Tanya's life was thrown into its deepest abyss. Just 1 week after Eli and Nina were taken from her, Tanya's mother, the one person she loved more than anyone, passed away, leaving a bottomless void in her heart. Her mother had been admitted to the hospital, utterly exhausted by a prolonged, violent illness. The cramped, chilly room, barely large enough for a narrow bed and a few outdated medical devices, felt like a cruel reminder of life's injustices. Tanya clasped her mother's hand, feeling the frail, cold skin slipping away with each shallow breath. In that moment, she felt herself shatter into 1,000 pieces. In her final moments, her mother opened her eyes and gently smoothed Tanya's hair, just as she had when Tanya was a little girl. Her voice was weak but unwavering. "Tanya, my dear, I know you're in so much pain, but promise me you won't let this sorrow defeat you. Turn every hurt and injustice you've suffered into the strength to build something greater. You deserve happiness and success, my daughter." Those last words were a faint spark, but enough to ignite Tanya's heart. Tears flowed down her cheeks, not from despair this time, but from a fierce resolve to rise from the ashes. A few days after the funeral, Tanya quietly packed away her mother's keepsakes. In an old, battered box, she discovered a faded business card bearing a familiar name. Marcus Chun, lawyer. She remembered him as her mother's closest friend in youth, though they had long since lost touch. Seeing his name sparked something within Tanya, fueling her determination. Without hesitation, she reached out to Marcus. They met in a small cafe on a rainy afternoon, the gentle patter of droplets creating a private, reflective atmosphere. Now, in his 50s, Marcus stood tall and composed, his thoughtful face radiating sincerity. When Tanya entered, he rose and took her hand, his eyes brimming with emotion. "Tanya, dear Ruth's daughter, I'm so sorry I wasn't there to help your mother and you in your greatest time of need." Tanya sat and calmly recounted her story, the grueling days at the Golden Fork, her kindness toward the orphaned Eli and Nina, and Robert Manning's cruel racism that had stripped everything from her. Marcus listened intently, his gaze sharpening at the mention of Manning, a man he knew well as a powerful city businessman. "You've never let anyone know," Tanya said, pulling a thick dossier from her bag. "But over the past months, while cleaning offices at night, I gathered evidence. Fake invoices, payroll records showing blatant discrimination against employees of color, even recorded conversations of Manning spewing racial hatred. I thought you'd know best what to do with this." Marcus carefully flipped through the pages, his eyes widening with a mix of shock and admiration. He paused, looking up at Tanya with genuine respect. "Tanya, what you've done is extraordinary. These documents could bring down Manning and his entire empire, but tell me, are you seeking revenge or justice?" Tanya was silent for a moment, gazing out at the rain-soaked street. Then she looked him squarely in the eye, her voice steady and resolute. "Uncle Marcus, this isn't about my personal vendetta. Yes, Manning stole everything from me, but what hurts me most is knowing that injustice like this doesn't affect only me. I'm doing this to change a world built on prejudice and unfairness. I want to transform my suffering into something better, something fairer." Marcus smiled proudly, placing his hand over the dossier. "Then you're not alone. I'll stand by you. Together, we'll confront Robert Manning and those like him. I promise you, we'll bring the truth to light." That rainy afternoon, Tanya left the cafe with a heart full of hope. She knew, from that moment on, her life was irrevocably changed. The months of pain and humiliation Manning had inflicted would no longer weigh her down, but instead fuel her every step toward justice and a brighter future. Not just for herself, but for everyone who has suffered as she did. The pale moonlight of that night hadn't even faded before Tanya's life was plunged into its greatest trial, one that sent her spirit tumbling into a bottomless abyss. Just 1 week after Eli and Nina were whisked away, Tanya's mother, the woman she loved more than anyone, passed on forever, leaving an endless chasm of grief in her heart. Her mother had been admitted to the hospital utterly exhausted by a prolonged, vicious illness. The tiny, frigid room, barely enough for a narrow bed and some outdated medical equipment, felt like a cruel reminder of life's injustices. Tanya clasped her mother's hand, feeling the frail, icy skin growing more lifeless with each shallow breath. In that moment, she felt as though she were shattering into 1,000 pieces. In her final moments, her mother opened her eyes and gently stroked Tanya's hair, just as she had when Tanya was a child. Her voice, though weak, remained unwavering. "Tanya, my dear, I know you're in so much pain, but promise me you won't let this sorrow destroy you. Turn every hurt and injustice you've endured into the strength to build something greater. You deserve happiness and success, my daughter." Those last words were a flicker of light, small, yet powerful enough to rekindle Tanya's will to live. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but this time they were not tears of despair. They were tears of fierce determination, ready to rise from the ashes. A few days after the funeral, Tanya quietly packed away her mother's mementos. In an old, weathered box, she discovered a tarnished business card bearing a familiar name, Marcus Chun, lawyer. She remembered he had been her mother's closest friend in youth, though they'd long since lost touch. Seeing his name ignited something within Tanya, a spark of hope and resolve stronger than ever. Without delay, she reached out to Marcus. They met in a small cafe one rainy afternoon, the soft patter of raindrops creating a private, contemplative atmosphere. Now, in his 50s, Marcus greeted her with a gentle warmth, his eyes reflecting genuine concern. When Tanya arrived, he rose to take her hand, voice choked with emotion. "Tanya, dear Ruth's daughter, I'm so sorry I wasn't there to help your mother, or you, in your greatest hour of need." Tanya sat and calmly recounted everything. Her grueling days at the Golden Fork, the mercy she showed to orphaned Eli and Nina, and Robert Manning's cruel, racist campaign that cost her everything. Marcus listened intently, his expression growing grave at the mention of Manning, a man he knew well as a powerful figure in the city. "You've never made this public," Tanya said, pulling a thick dossier from her bag. "But over the past months, while cleaning offices at night, I gathered evidence, fraudulent invoices, payroll records exposing blatant discrimination against employees of color, even recorded conversations of Manning using racial slurs. I thought you'd know what to do with this better than I ever could." Marcus carefully thumbed through the pages, his eyes widening in astonishment and pride. Finally, he looked up at Tanya with heartfelt admiration. "Tanya, what you've done is extraordinary. These documents could bring down Manning and his entire empire. But tell me, are you seeking vengeance or justice?" Tanya paused, gazing out at the rain-soaked street. Then she met his eyes, her voice steady and resolute. "Uncle Marcus, this isn't about personal revenge. Yes, Manning stole everything from me, but what wounds me most is knowing that injustice like this doesn't affect only me. I want to change a world built on prejudice and unfairness. I'll use my suffering to build something better, something fairer." Marcus smiled proudly, placing his hand over the dossier. "Then you're not alone. I'll stand by you. Together, we'll face Robert Manning and those who think they're above the law. I promise you. We'll bring the truth to light." That rainy afternoon, Tanya left the cafe with hope burning brightly in her heart. She knew that from that moment on, her life had irrevocably changed. The months of pain and humiliation Manning had inflicted would no longer weigh her down. They would fuel her every step toward justice and a brighter future. Not just for herself, but for everyone who has endured similar injustices. Every night in that tiny room, Tanya sat silently under the dim glow of her old desk lamp, carefully arranging the evidence she had collected from Manning's office. Every photograph, every audio clip was a crucial piece of the justice puzzle she and attorney Marcus Chun had painstakingly assembled over the past several months. Then, one late evening while she was cleaning the expansive offices of Manning Enterprises, Tanya accidentally heard a familiar voice drifting from the conference room next door. She paused her dusting and crept closer to listen. That confident, ambitious tone could only belong to Robert Manning. "Next week, we'll finalize the most important contract we've ever signed, with Germany's Hanscom Group. This will be the pivotal moment that propels Manning Enterprises onto the global stage. I will not allow a single error, understood?" Those words echoed through the silent halls, and Tanya stood motionless, her breath catching in her chest. She knew this was the golden opportunity she had been waiting for, a rare chance to strike a decisive blow against the man who had belittled and trampled her for so many years. The very next day, Tanya rushed to meet Marcus Chun at his modest downtown law office. As she recounted what she'd overheard, Marcus's eyes lit up. He flipped through her previously submitted documents, his voice firm and confident. "You've done brilliantly, Tanya. This is exactly the leverage we need. If we can show Hanscom Group that Manning Enterprises is deeply entangled in both racial discrimination and tax evasion, this massive deal will evaporate. Our priority now is to assemble a flawless, airtight legal dossier to present to regulators and the international press. Tanya nodded resolutely, her eyes shining with fierce hope. I'm ready, Uncle Marcus. I'll do whatever it takes to bring the truth to light. Over the following days, Tanya and Marcus threw themselves into the work. With decades of legal experience, Marcus methodically organized every piece of evidence Tanya had gathered. He crafted detailed analyses, building an exhaustive, iron-clad legal case. As they stayed up late each night reviewing the materials, Tanya grew ever more aware of the enormity of Manning's crimes. He hadn't just evaded taxes on an industrial scale. He'd instituted blatantly discriminatory hiring and pay practices, flouting every legal safeguard. The deeper their investigation went, the darker the revelations became. One evening, as Tanya was photographing documents in Manning's personal office, she suddenly heard hurried footsteps outside the door. Quick. Thinking, she slipped behind a heavy curtain, her heart pounding in her throat. The door burst open and Manning stormed in alongside his personal assistant, his face flushed with anger. He slammed his hand on the desk, snarling, "I told you. How did word of this contract leak out? If our competitors catch wind, everything falls apart." His assistant stammered, voice trembling. "We've double-checked, sir. It may just be baseless rumors. But should we postpone the signing to be safe?" Manning's fury exploded, his expression terrifyingly fierce. "Postpone? Do you have any idea how much time I've invested in negotiating this deal? Absolutely not. You will do whatever it takes to ensure this signing goes off without a hitch. And one more thing. Do not let a single person of color anywhere near the ceremony. Is that clear?" Yes, sir," the assistant stuttered. Hidden in the shadows, Tanya's blood boiled with anger and resolve. Stealthily, she pulled out her phone and recorded every bigoted word. Each syllable would become the strongest evidence in her and Marcus's arsenal. As soon as Manning and his assistant left, Tanya slipped out of the building, her heart racing, adrenaline surging. Not just from narrowly avoiding detection, but from knowing the decisive moment was close at hand. Back in Marcus Chun's small office, he replayed Tanya's recording, his face grave. This is the smoking, gun-proof. No investor, especially an international powerhouse like the Hanscom Group, will tolerate a partner mired in racial discrimination scandals. Tanya nodded, her voice ringing with determination. "We must release all this evidence before the signing. Give Manning zero time to react." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, pride and confidence shining in his eyes. "Tanya, you've fought with extraordinary courage. Now, let me handle the final steps. I'll contact investigators and major media outlets immediately. It's time the world learned the truth about Manning Enterprises." Tanya gazed out the window into the ink. Black night, but inside her burned a bright flame of hope. She knew that this was the moment that would decide Manning's fate, and that the justice she had devoted her life to would soon be served. In the cramped office of attorney Marcus Chun, the glow from the laptop screen illuminated Tanya's determined face as she and Marcus performed one final review of their legal dossier. Tanya knew this was the decisive moment. With a single click, all the suffering, injustice, and humiliation she had endured would surge forth like a tidal wave, completely stripping away Robert Manning's facade of power and prestige. Marcus turned to her, his gaze serious yet full of confidence. "This is your last chance to reconsider, Tanya. Once we send this evidence out, there's no going back." Tanya met his eyes, her voice unnervingly calm. "I've waited for this moment for far too long, Uncle Marcus. There's nothing left to reconsider. I'm ready to face whatever comes." Marcus nodded and gently pressed enter. In an instant, a flurry of emails, each containing the full evidentiary file, was dispatched to the IRS, relevant regulatory agencies, and the region's major news outlets. The next morning, before the sun even rose, a storm of public outrage erupted across every media channel. Major networks broke the story of Manning Enterprises' egregious tax evasion and systemic racial discrimination. Tanya's painstakingly gathered recordings and documents were published widely, revealing Robert Manning not as a respected businessman, but as a law, manipulating bigot who abused his power to oppress the vulnerable. Across town, in the opulent Manning Enterprises headquarters, Robert Manning awoke to the greatest shock of his life. His cell phone buzzed incessantly with calls from partners, lawyers, and senior staff. His face drained of color when his personal assistant burst into his office, panic written on her face. "Mr. Manning, the IRS is here," she panted. "They have a search warrant and demand to review all financial records." Manning sprang to his feet, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "The IRS? How is this possible? Who would dare do this to me?" Before he could gather his wits, more bad news arrived. The assistant continued, her tone grim. "Sir, the press already has all the details and proof of our illegal activities. They've just published a series of exposés on every major news channel. It's completely out of control." Manning slumped into his chair, feeling as though his world had collapsed. Everything he had built, his reputation, his fortune, his influence, crumbled in an instant. In a fit of rage and despair, he pounded his fist on the desk and shouted, "Who's behind this? Who betrayed me?" There was no time to ponder the answer. That afternoon, the much-anticipated contract signing with Germany's Hanscom Group was set to proceed. Manning forced himself to calm down, hoping to salvage the deal before his international partners. He straightened his tie, adjusted his jacket, and strode into the grand conference room with a mask of confidence. But as he entered, the atmosphere was icy and tense. Representatives from Hanscom, investors Manning had courted for months, looked at him with contempt and disappointment. The Hanscom chairman, a stern elder statesman, rose to speak, his voice cold as steel. "Mr. Manning, we have received detailed information about your company's serious misconduct, including tax evasion and unacceptable racial discrimination policies. This is not only an ethical violation, but a severe breach of international business standards." Manning tried to explain, his voice quavering. "Please, hear me out. This is all a misunderstanding. I assure you, I will sort everything out." But the chairman cut him off, firm and unwavering. "No, Mr. Manning, this is not a misunderstanding. We cannot do business with a company that flagrantly disregards the law and basic ethics. This contract is hereby terminated, effective immediately." The conference room door slammed shut as the Hanscom delegation departed in cold silence. Manning stood frozen, realizing with agonizing clarity that no amount of power or prestige could save him now. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Tanya and Marcus Chun watched the live news feed on a small office TV. Tanya listened in silence, a wave of relief and emotion surging through her. Marcus placed a proud hand on her shoulder and smiled. "Tanya, you did it. Justice has finally been served, and Manning has paid dearly for his crimes." Tanya nodded, tears of happiness and hope shining in her eyes. She knew this was just the beginning of a long journey, but now she was ready to keep fighting, to protect those who were powerless as she once was. and to help build a world where fairness and truth always prevail. The expansive, luxurious office of Manning Enterprises now felt eerily cold. Robert Manning sat motionless in his plush leather chair, eyes vacant as he stared at the scattered newspapers on his desk. Headlines like icy knives kept plunging into his mind. Manning Enterprises, empire of tax evasion and bigotry. Robert Manning under serious IRS investigation. Hanscom Group pulls out of $1 million deal. Calls from lawyers, associates, even his closest friends abruptly stopped. One by one they abandoned him, treating him like a contagious disease. Never before had Manning felt such crushing loneliness. For years he'd thrived on praise and respect. He never imagined he could fall so far. The phone on his desk suddenly rang, jolting him from his thoughts. He picked it up, his voice hoarse and drained. "Hello?" A brief silence, then a calm, cold, female voice. "It's me, Tanya Jefferson, Mr. Manning." At the sound of her name, Manning felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. He bolted upright, eyes wide with a mix of shock and fury. "Tanya? Why are you calling me now? Didn't you disappear from my life ages ago?" Tanya's reply was steady, every word sharp as a steel blade. "That's true, Mr. Manning. I didn't vanish. I was just waiting for the right moment to return. And now that moment is here. I want you to know the truth. I'm the one behind everything that's happened to you." A suffocating silence filled the room. Manning froze, his heart seeming to stop for a breath. After a long pause, he whispered, trembling, What are you saying? How could it be you?" Tanya continued in a measured, confident tone, each phrase chosen to hammer at his arrogance. "You always thought I was just a weak black woman. Unworthy of your notice, didn't you, Mr. Manning? You believed your power and wealth let you trample me into the dust with no consequences. But you were wrong. I was never as weak as you imagined, and your contempt only made me stronger." Manning's voice rose in desperate outrage. "Why are you doing this to me? What did I ever do to earn your hatred?" Tanya's voice remained unwavering. "I'm not doing this out of hatred or for personal revenge. I'm doing it for justice, Mr. Manning. You can't spend your life crushing others without ever paying a price. I want you to understand that racism, injustice, and the wrongs you committed will never escape punishment." Manning gripped the phone in fury and despair. "Justice? You call this justice? You've destroyed my career and reputation." Tanya's calm was astonishing. Each word drove home her point. "No, Mr. Manning, you destroyed yourself. I merely revealed the truth you spent so long hiding. You thought your power and money allowed you to break the law and demean people with impunity. But you severely underestimated me. I will never let anyone demean me, or the powerless, without facing consequences." Manning slumped back into his chair, world crashing down around him. In that moment, he finally realized how grievously he had misjudged Tanya. The woman he believed would always bend before him had enough strength, intelligence, and persistence to dismantle the empire he built over decades. In a bitter, defeated whisper, Manning spoke his final words. "Tanya, what more do you want from me? I have nothing left to lose." Tanya's tone softened, still conveying confidence and conviction. "I don't want anything from you, Mr. Manning. I called only so you'd understand that I did this not out of vengeance but to secure justice for everyone you've harmed. I hope you carry this lesson with you always. Real power isn't in wealth or influence. It's in honesty and respect for others." The call ended in heavy silence. Manning sat alone in his once grand office, now colder than ever, knowing his life would never be the same. Across the city, Tanya quietly set down her phone, feeling an almost unbelievable sense of relief. After years of suffering, she had finally stood her ground, looked her oppressor in the eye, and spoken the truth she'd carried in her heart. Not for revenge, but to prove that justice ultimately prevails, no matter how long it takes. Now, Tanya knew, her life was entering a new chapter, one brighter, more hopeful, and infinitely more meaningful. The call ended in deep silence, but its echo lingered in Tanya's mind like a triumphant symphony of justice. Gently, she set the phone down on the desk, her breathing slowly returning to normal after the intense tension. In that moment, she felt with complete clarity that her life was about to enter an entirely new chapter. Not long after, Tanya sat with Marcus Chun in his small but cozy office, the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminating the thick stack of files before them. Marcus looked at Tanya with uncommon pride. "Tanya, what you've accomplished isn't just a personal victory. It's a seismic shift, a powerful statement to society that anyone who wields power to oppress others must be held accountable." Tanya smiled softly, her eyes shining with fierce conviction. "Uncle Marcus, I know this is only the beginning. We need to turn this into a movement, a long-term endeavor. I don't want anyone else to endure what I went through." Marcus nodded, his expression growing solemn as he placed a hand on the pile of documents. "I completely agree. We must act in an organized, forceful, and effective way. The evidence you've gathered, combined with our skills and experience, can form the foundation of a specialized auditing firm, one dedicated to investigating discrimination and social injustice within major corporations. A place that will make people like Robert Manning tremble." Marcus's words ignited a clear, powerful new vision in Tanya's mind. Together, they spent the rest of the afternoon drafting a detailed plan for the new company. They named it Equalis Consulting, a title that clearly embodied their mission of equality and justice. In the weeks that followed, Tanya and Marcus worked tirelessly. They finalized legal documentation, leased a new office, and quickly recruited passionate young attorneys, each of whom had either experienced or witnessed social injustice. They brought the same fierce determination that drove Tanya, a commitment to fighting for justice and equality. As soon as it launched, Equalis Consulting sent shockwaves through the city's business and legal communities. With a team of sharp investigators and top-notch lawyers handpicked by Marcus, they began taking on cases of racial discrimination, labor injustices, and corporate corruption. Companies that had long exploited the powerless now found themselves wary and anxious at the mention of this rising firm. Within just a few short months, Tanya and her company achieved success far beyond expectations. Media outlets regularly covered Equalis's high-profile wins, and their reputation spread rapidly. Business leaders who once thought they could exploit workers or enact racist policies began to rethink their actions. Tanya Jefferson became a powerful symbol of perseverance, intelligence, and unwavering resolve against injustice. Meanwhile, Manning, now stripped of his reputation and assets, lived in isolation in a modest apartment, forced to avoid the judging eyes of the community. Every time Tanya's name appeared in the press or on television, it felt like another dagger to his wounded pride, a constant reminder of the monumental error in underestimating a woman he thought powerless. On one occasion, at a major social justice symposium held at a prestigious university, Tanya was the keynote speaker. She recounted her own story with heartfelt passion and persuasive eloquence, inspiring hundreds of attentive young students. In the crowd, Manning stood in a shadowed corner, watching her with a mixture of bitterness and reluctant admiration. He realized that everything he had inflicted on Tanya had been transformed into her greatest strength, propelling her to heights he had never imagined. After the symposium, Tanya happened to cross paths with Manning as she exited the auditorium. They locked eyes for a tense moment of silence. Finally, Manning spoke first, his voice weak and weary. "Tanya, I was wrong to underestimate you. I now understand you are far stronger than I ever thought." Tanya returned his gaze, her expression free of anger or hatred. Instead, she showed a gentle, resolute compassion. "I never wanted you to suffer just for me, Mr. Manning, but I hope you've learned that justice endures, no matter how long it takes." Manning bowed his head wordlessly and walked away. In that moment, Tanya knew she had fully escaped her past's shadow. She was now ready to move forward on her path with complete confidence and pride. Equalis Consulting continued to expand, rapidly becoming the torchbearer in the fight against corporate injustice and racial discrimination. For Tanya, true success was not only overcoming her own painful history, but building something far greater, a future in which justice and equality truly exist for everyone. The resounding successes of Tanya and Equalis Consulting quickly turned her into a powerful symbol in the fight against injustice and discrimination. Time passed swiftly, but Tanya never forgot the memories that first set her on this path. Memories of the two small children who once stood shivering at the back door of the Golden Fork restaurant. One gentle autumn afternoon, as Tanya sat in her office reviewing recently completed case files, her cell phone on the desk buzzed softly. When she answered, a familiar gentle voice on the other end made her heart skip a beat. "Big Sister Tanya? It's me, Nina." In that instant, Tanya could hardly believe her ears. The image of little Nina, frail, clutching her brother on those bitter winter nights, flashed vividly before her as if it were only yesterday. "Nina, is it really you? Oh my goodness, I haven't heard your voice in so long," Tanya exclaimed, nearly overcome with emotion. "Yes, it's me, Big Sister Tanya," Nina replied, her voice now that of a mature, confident young woman. "Eli and I have been searching for you all these years. We've finally found you. We'd love to see you. Could we please meet?" Without hesitation, Tanya agreed. The very next day, she waited nervously at a quiet little restaurant downtown. When the door opened, she leapt to her feet, tears blurring her vision. Two poised, successful young adults stepped inside, and in that moment she recognized Eli and Nina, now grown, self-assured, and radiant. Eli rushed forward, enveloping her in a grateful embrace. "Tanya, we've finally found you. I've never forgotten those freezing nights when you saved us. We still carry that photograph of us with you in our wallets, a constant reminder of your kindness and bravery." Nina joined in, tears glistening on her now mature face. "Sister Tanya, if it weren't for you, Eli and I would never be who we are today. You didn't just save our lives, you showed us the power of compassion and how to face the world with strength." They sat down together, and the siblings shared their lives since being taken in by social services. At first, Eli and Nina struggled in the foster center, but the memory of Tanya's secret nightly meals guided them through every hardship. Fueled by that past, Eli dreamed of opening a chain of humanitarian restaurants, places that would offer both great food and job opportunities to the homeless and those in need. "Tanya, I'll never forget those meals you slipped to us each night," Eli recounted emotionally. "They inspired me to build restaurants that not only serve delicious food, but also create employment and support for people down on their luck." Nina spoke proudly of her career as a human rights attorney, fighting tirelessly for those facing discrimination and injustice. "For years, I've battled in court against prejudice and bigotry. I always remind myself that without your help, I wouldn't have found the strength to defend others the way I do now. You, Tanya, are my greatest inspiration." Tanya listened, her heart swelling with pride and joy. This reunion was living proof that even the smallest acts of kindness can spark tremendous change. They laughed over old memories and shed happy tears. Tanya shared the story of her struggle against Robert Manning and the founding of Equalis Consulting. Eli and Nina listened intently, their eyes shining with respect and admiration. When Tanya described the night she confronted Manning over the phone, Eli squeezed her hand, his voice thick with emotion. "You did the right thing, Tanya. People like Manning need to understand that no one has the right to oppress others just because they have more power." As their meeting drew to a close, the three embraced once more, deeply aware that although life had taken them on very different journeys, fate had brought them back together, stronger, wiser, and united in the fight for justice and kindness. Eli looked at Tanya with heartfelt determination. "Tanya, I believe we should join forces. My humanitarian restaurants, Nina's law practice, and your firm Equalis Consulting could work together to create even greater impact." Tanya smiled warmly, her heart aglow. "That's exactly what I've been hoping for. Together, we can achieve something truly extraordinary." Bathed in the soft glow of that autumn sunset, Tanya realized this reunion was more than a long-awaited family gathering. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with purpose, hope, and the collective power to build a more just and compassionate world. That deeply emotional reunion became a watershed moment, sparking bolder ideas than Tanya had ever dared to imagine. Bathed in the soft glow of the late afternoon sun descending over the city, Tanya, Eli, and Nina sat together in a tranquil space, their hearts brimming with hope and a shared resolve to shape the future. As their recollections of the past gently closed, Eli looked up at Tanya and Nina, his eyes alight with excitement. "Tanya, Nina, I believe this is the perfect moment for us to build something grander and more enduring. We shouldn't limit ourselves to helping individuals one by one. We need to create an organization strong enough to transform countless lives, especially those of children and anyone suffering injustice or prejudice." Nina immediately agreed, her voice full of fervor and determination. "You're absolutely right, Eli. With the experience you've gained running your humanitarian restaurant, the lawsuits my law office is handling, and Tanya's tenacious advocacy at Equalis Consulting, we already have the foundation to launch a large-scale social fund that can deliver real, lasting change." Tanya nodded, her eyes shining with uncommon excitement and conviction. "Exactly. We must build an institution powerful enough that anyone facing discrimination or oppression can turn to it for comprehensive support. Not only financial aid, but also education, vocational training, and free legal counseling. A foundation whose very name inspires thoughts of justice, equality, and hope." Their enthusiasm coalesced into unanimous agreement. They decided to call it the Tanya Eli Nina Foundation, honoring the challenging yet profoundly meaningful journey they had shared and overcome together. In just a few short weeks, buoyed by the reputations they had forged through years of fierce advocacy, the foundation won widespread backing from the community and major donors. Business leaders, artists, and social activists enthusiastically rallied, providing abundant resources so the foundation could immediately launch ambitious programs. The Tanya, Eli, Nina Foundation swiftly opened support centers in several major cities, granting thousands of underprivileged children access to high-quality education. At these centers, youngsters not only learned core academics, but also life skills and basic legal knowledge, equipping them with the confidence and awareness to defend themselves against social injustices. Under Nina's leadership, the foundation also assembled a dedicated legal team ready to offer pro bono representation to anyone marginalized or discriminated against in their workplaces. Nina regularly hosted legal workshops, teaching participants how to recognize and fight bias, igniting a powerful movement that reshaped public understanding of human rights. Meanwhile, Eli took charge of the foundation's humanitarian restaurant chain. His venues quickly became beloved community hubs, not just for their delicious fare but for their high-minded mission. Each restaurant employed and trained homeless individuals and people with disabilities at no cost, helping them reintegrate into society with dignity and purpose. As for Tanya, serving as the foundation's CEO and head of Equalis Consulting, she became a fixture at major international forums, sharing her personal story and passionately championing the fight against racism and social injustice. Every appearance underscored her pride not in defeating any one adversary like Robert Manning, but in transforming her own suffering into the driving force for building a brighter future for others. Soon, the Tanya Ely Nina Foundation emerged as a potent symbol of social justice, directly uplifting thousands of lives. Heartfelt thank you letters from children and the tearful gratitude of families who had endured injustice stood as the clearest testament to the remarkable legacy these three friends had built. Robert Manning, by contrast, sank into lonely regret. Each time the foundation's name appeared in the press, he was painfully reminded of his greatest mistake, underestimating the strength hidden within a woman he once believed too powerless to fight back. For Tanya, however, her greatest triumph lay not in personal accolades but in the enduring, positive change she enabled for others. Watching the children at her foundation centers grow up with hope and self-assurance, she knew she had achieved something far more precious than any personal victory. One late, year afternoon, as Tanya sat beside Eli and Nina in the foundation's main office, gazing out at the kids playing happily in the courtyard, she smiled softly and said, "We've come a long way to arrive here, and our greatest accomplishment is planting the seeds of kindness and justice for the future. Though much work still lies ahead, I believe we are on the right path, and every step we take makes the world a little bit better." Eli and Nina nodded in unison, their eyes reflecting deep gratitude for Tanya, the woman who had led them and, together, created a miracle beyond their wildest dreams. That year's final afternoon, in the warm, inviting office of the Tanya, Eli, Nina Foundation, Tanya gazed out the window at the children playing joyfully in the courtyard. Their pure laughter echoed through the halls, carrying hope and a reminder that even the deepest wounds of the past can nurture something beautiful. Before long, Tanya's inspiring story and the foundation's journey had captured widespread attention in the community and the press. One day, she accepted an invitation for a special interview on national television, an opportunity to share her life's story and the profound message she wished to spread with millions of viewers. Under the bright studio lights, Tanya sat up straight, her calm eyes focused on the host, veteran journalist Martha Wilson. With clear respect, Martha asked the first question. "Tanya, your story has touched so many hearts. Yet audiences are most curious about this. After all the injustice and pain you endured, how did you find the strength to forgive and focus on building rather than settling scores?" Tanya offered a gentle smile, reflecting for a moment before answering in a rich, compelling voice. "Martha, I believe true justice never means destroying others. When we're hurt, our first instinct is often revenge, but revenge doesn't bring peace. It only creates a vicious cycle of hatred and more injustice. I chose a different path, to transform my own suffering into powerful motivation to build something better, creating opportunities so others never have to endure what I did. Moved, Martha nodded and pressed on. How do you feel about Robert Manning now, the man who caused you so much suffering? Tanya paused briefly, her expression solemn yet compassionate. I know Mr. Manning now lives in isolation and despair. Honestly, I don't take pleasure in his downfall. Rather, I see him as a living reminder of the consequences of discrimination and injustice. He chose his path, and this outcome is the result of those choices. I hope his story serves as a stark warning that trampling on others never leads to true happiness. Across town, Robert Manning sat alone in his small, cold apartment, watching Tanya's interview on an old television. Her words filled the silent room, striking him painfully. But for the first time, he fully grasped how completely he had been wrong. Over the years, Manning's life had become lonely and empty. Friends and allies abandoned him one by one, former supporters turning away as though he were a living testament to the perils of pride and bigotry. He had lost everything: his reputation, his wealth, his power, and most painfully his self-respect. On screen, Tanya continued in a warm, forgiving tone. I don't want anyone to suffer loneliness and despair like that. What I hope to share is the power of forgiveness and compassion. We can't change the past, but we can build a fairer, kinder future from the lessons it taught us. Her words resonated with viewers, reigniting belief in goodness and the healing of old wounds. Tanya closed the interview with a heartfelt call to action. To everyone listening, remember, we all carry scars from past hurts. Instead of letting them turn us bitter, let them serve as the foundation for strength and empathy. Use your own story to create something better in this world. Thunderous applause filled the studio as the interview ended. As Tanya left the set, she felt a profound lightness and joy, knowing that her message of compassion had truly reached many hearts. In his lonely apartment, Manning turned off the TV and bowed his head. In that moment, he understood that the woman he had once dismissed and trampled upon had given him the most profound lesson of all, the transformative power of kindness and forgiveness. Outside, Tanya stepped into the cool evening air, inhaling deeply as a gentle breeze brushed her face. She realized that from the pain and wounds of her past, she had planted seeds of hope and goodness in countless lives. Now, each step she took forward was driven by the conviction that, no matter what circumstances life throws at us, the choice between hatred and forgiveness, between destruction and creation, always remains ours to make. Tanya's story shows us that true strength doesn't lie in revenge or in tearing others down, but in turning our suffering into hope and building a better future from the very wounds we once carried. What do you think of this message? If you were in Tanya's shoes, would you choose forgiveness and rebuilding, or would you seek revenge to soothe your pain? If this story moved you, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more meaningful, inspiring tales.